why don't I call the meeting to order? I apologize for this. And I will ask Ellen to take the roll call for the meeting.
Certainly, thank you. Trustee Doak. Trustee Doak, you're still on mute.
I am. Sorry about that.
Good morning.
It's Monday.
Trustee Eames.
Here.
Trustee Irwin.
Here.
Trustee McMahon.
Here.
Trustee Mishu.
Present.
Trustee Tim.
Here.
And I believe Trustee Gardner was not able to join us. I don't believe he's on. And we had other trustees who would be non-voting members of the committee is Trevor Eustace. And I believe Jessica Nixon was going to be participating on behalf of Commissioner Macon. We are all set to start.
Thank you so much, Ellen. May I remind meeting participants to leave your microphone muted, please. You are not speaking. And so I'm in Southern Maine. It's gray and kind of rainy and cold. I don't know if any of you are getting snow where you are, but I hope you're staying
Sleeting in
warm.
Orono.
Is it really? Wow. Wow. With that, why don't I turn the program over to Rosa for awarding of academic degrees.
Hi, good morning, all. Yes, and Lisa, it's the same way in Bristol. Grim and a little rainy. Not sleeting, though, thank God. So the first item on our agenda today is the awarding of academic degrees. As the trustees know, we do this every year. It basically gives us the authority to award degrees in May, for which our students will be very grateful as you approve this one. And this one does go on the consent agenda at the November board meeting. Any questions? It's fairly straightforward.
All right. Well, seeing none. Thank you, Rosa. I will read the text of the resolution. And that is that the Academic and Student Affairs Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees approval at the November 16th, 2020 board meeting. And the resolution reads as follows. That the Board of Trustees approves the recommendation of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee to authorize the awarding of degrees during commencement ceremonies for the 2020-2021 academic year to those students fully recommended by the appropriate faculties and the presidents of the respective institutions of the University of Maine system. Are there any questions or discussions?
I move we adopt it.
Thank you. Trustee Mishu, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee McMahon. Ellen, would you please take the roll call vote?
Trustee Doak.
Yes.
Trustee Eames.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Mishu.
Yes.
Trustee Tim.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. And thank you for that, Rosa. And I think you are up again with the academic calendar.
You're going to see me a few times. Thank you. As you all know, every year we approve a new collection of calendars. And we try to do this well in advance so that it aids in campus planning, the planning of our students and our faculty and staff, obviously. And so the two you have before you today are academic years 2023-24 and 24-25, which feels like a really long time from now, but given how fast these years go, it'll be faster than you can imagine. They are as normal. The October break is in there as normal. The spring breaks are in there as normal, as would be our calendars next year and the year after. A reminder that our calendar for the spring was adjusted to accommodate for the removal of the spring break, but starting a week later. So that one calendar obviously is different from what you would have seen normally. but these are back to norm. Any questions about the academic calendar? On the A sheet, we included a link to our process. We came into alignment with our academic calendars, so about 4 or 5 years ago, through work across all 7 institutions on behalf of our chief academic officers. And that is the format that we follow today. And this is an information item only. It's not something you need to vote on. Any questions?
Okay,
Great.
seeing none.
It is
I know-
always
I
good
know.
to plan in advance.
It sure is. It sure is. Well, thank you. And so Rosa, I think you have item number 3.
Yep.
With Megan.
Yep, Megan Clough and I will be talking to you about the imperative for change. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me 1 minute. Okay, bear with me 1 second, okay? Because that's not working. I need to get rid of this. I've got too many things on my screen, so my apology. Okay, I don't know why this is doing what it's doing. Sorry, bear with me 1 second.
As someone said, it's Monday morning.
It is, you know. Actually, I was practicing this morning and I could hardly get 2 words out of my mouth, so it was very exciting. There, this is gonna work, gosh darn it. There, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. He says with relief in his voice.
No worries, Rosa. We ripped through the first part, so you have a couple minutes to spare.
Okay, can you all see it fine? Okay, now I have to move all of your pictures so that I can see my notes. Okay, after the imperative for change message that came out this summer, the academic affairs and human resources started to work on the initiatives mentioned within the imperative for change charge independently. We both realized the importance of connecting and collaborating in this work and saw many ideas and areas where we actually overlapped. Our work together started by jointly creating this presentation, which we've presented at the September 14th HRLR committee meeting. We've planned for today. Today's incorporates some progress updates and some valuable feedback we received from the HRLR meeting. And we are also preparing for an upcoming board meeting, which will enable us to include and demonstrate collaboration with the campuses who really know their community's needs, their progress, and do the very heavy lifting for this work. Here's the specific wording encompassed in the Chancellor's June 2020 Imperative for Change message, a message whose nature of commitment was echoed by every campus president to their constituents. What we'll be doing with ASA is regularly updating you on decisions we're taking and actions we're taking, and then coming to ASA in the case any policy item does need decisions at the board level. But again, we'll be providing regular updates as we move forward with this work. We obviously know that a key and critical part of this work is defining what we all mean when we say diversity, equity, inclusion, and what it is to advocate for anti-oppression and anti-bias. As an example, at our CAOC meeting, we really dug into the higher level of this work. With recent contextual circumstances importantly focused on anti-racism, we wanted to ask ourselves about UMS's overall commitment. With anti-oppression as well as with anti-bias, we all agreed that this makes our work, our inclusion work, focus more on creating belonging for every marginalized group, and is an important frame for looking at all of our policies and practices through an anti-bias lens.
Good morning, everybody. I'm joining Rosa, and my name is Megan Clough. I don't have the privilege of being with this committee often, so just a little bit of backdrop. I have been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work for 20 plus years, and therefore I'm doing some of the mini educational pieces throughout this presentation. At one point, I'd been the EO director here at the University of Maine System, and then intentionally, as our structure was built, have focused on organizational development to do the work integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion and other dynamics. So the image that you're seeing here is something that's called the diversity wheel. It was developed by two people, Garden, Swartz, and Rowe, and it's one of those models that stands the test of time. The important piece that Rosa and I had wanted to share is why this has to do with the work that we're doing. And the simple method for introducing that is there are 4 layers of diversity here. And if you can imagine that the internal personality, the internal dimensions, race, age, gender, and go around that circle, and the external dimensions equate to a person. So I represent all 3 of those levels, and everybody on this call does as well. We represent those levels. We are those. We're walking imagery of that. And when we walk into the University of Maine system, whether that's as an employee or as a student, we walk into a structure. I shared with Rosa that I like to use the imagery of one of those transformers, which shows that I have kiddos, but also is a great image for when we walk into an organization, that organization locks up around us, and that's that outer layer. So everything in orange there that you see is essentially a descriptor of the structural dynamics that our students walk into. And everything in that layer that's in black and blue is what our employees walk into. And so the work that we have in doing this is looking at that and saying, is it welcoming? Is it inclusive? Is it equitable? So that's the important work. And the next area is really, well, why do we do this? There's the very obvious reason why, which is it is the right thing to do. We stand for, in higher education, humanity and equity, and teaching our students that they are the ones that are our future, and ensuring that we do that throughout our world. There are also very practical applications for it for the University of Maine system. This slide just very quickly shows that our traditional age students are already a demographic minority if they are Caucasian. And so, and then those of us who are older than our traditional age students, we may find, depending on what bucket we're in, that there could be several years ahead of us before we'll find that we are a demographic minority. What does that really mean? It means that our traditional age students are already far more knowledgeable in this area than we are, and they represent who we're seeking to support. And also it represents that our demographics across the United States and internationally are very diverse and becoming more and more diverse. And so if we want to attract, if we want to support and attract and be competitive, then we're going to need to continue to really focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. As the next slide additionally shows, this quickly shows the number of searches that we tend to conduct on the employee side. And then in the middle, what you can see is our demographics in comparison to the student demographics. And so what you'll quickly see is that our student demographics are more diverse, notably, than our faculty and staff demographics. And so as we think about places where each and every one of us wants to feel like we can see ourselves, where we can grow and develop with mentors who are familiar, comfortable, and trusting, and who really get our own history and can teach and focus in this area. It behooves us as an institution to continue to diversify. And moving into the next area, not only continue to diversify. It's not merely around representation, it's around recognizing that our inherent diversity brings significant benefit when it is leveraged. So when we leverage the benefit of whether it's gender or age or cultural diversity or any of the ways in which we are profoundly unique, what we discover is that it creates significant business benefit for organizations. So those are some examples. I'm happy to provide some of the research studies behind this if you're interested. And shifting to Rosa, who will describe the number of conversations that we've been having since the Imperative for Change message.
So as you can see from this slide, we've been really concentrating on 4 things, critical conversations across the campuses and across the system, taking a look at our current resources, what do we really need to be able to do this work and do it effectively, doing a starting analysis of the work that's been done to date, as well as different papers that have been written for leadership over the years. And then there have also been some preliminary conversations with Chief of Staff Jim Phelan and Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration Ryan Lowe. And then looking at possibilities for grants. Megan, do you want to add anything else to this piece? Because you've done some additional work on the HR side, obviously, that you might want to call out.
So we've been similarly, as Rose had mentioned, she's had some unique conversations. We've also been doing some data dives relative to staffing and employment and hiring, and also looking at those comparative to employment laws. These are things that we do on a regular basis as well. So this isn't a new dynamic. It is certainly an inflection point.
Rosa, this is Glenn. I could just add a little bit to your conversation here. Well, one of your 4 areas of analysis or workload is very aligned with some of the thinking that we've been doing. And one thing that I would put on the agenda for us to look at as a system is that we began 3 years ago, requiring all faculty members who are going to be on a search committee to take we use the Harvard implicit bias. I'm not an expert in this, but the Harvard implicit bias training program really does get to your personal biases. We don't really realize how often we tend to rehire people who went to the same schools that we did, drive the same cars we did, eat the same arugula we do, whatever it is. We don't realize how much our implicit biases are playing out there, and the results have been beyond kind of my imagination. 2 years ago, our new faculty hires were equal to the number of students, about 20% that identify as people of color, and this year it was 41% of our new faculty that we hired are people of color, and so. I definitely put that on your agenda here. It sounds like you may have implicitly been covered that, but that's really, I think we all have to really look at our biases in particularly in the hiring process, or we just end up replicating ourselves. And it's not necessarily out of direct malice. It's just, we tend to say, oh, well, I identify with that person. Let's bring them into the faculty. So.
That's such an important point. Such an important point. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. I would echo that too. The implicit association test from Harvard is a critical piece, and building on what President Cummings, you've said, it's integrating implicit bias throughout every stage of the search, which I know that you have done at USM to great impact. And I know is occurring in other areas throughout the system as well now. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and these kinds of considerations in our hiring practices are exactly the kind of example where we just saw the academic affairs work and human resource work coming hand in hand. And it makes that work more powerful and impactful. So thank you. It's a great point, really important point. As a part of this work, we also took a look at our history of commitment here within the University of Maine system. The view is encouraging, and Megan taught me a long time ago, it's not but, it's and. It reflects on the stewarding of this work in a coordinated, collaborative way, plus the work itself has been neglected and in some cases dismantled, especially at the system level. I would venture to guess that I may be the one person in this collective virtual room who's been here long enough to remember every single one of these reports. I was at USM in 1989 when the pluralism work was done. And I was actually on the committee for USM for our portion of that work. I remember the 1998 plan. It was a plan that we were all very proud of. But when you look at it, despite all the good pieces that are in there and pieces that still resonate today, it sat on a shelf. And so now's the time to re-energize this work. And many times the reasons of why work like this gets set aside seems sensible or reasonable at the time. Leadership transitions, financial stressors, simple capacity, so much flying at you every day that turning your attention to one more thing feels almost impossible. But independently or together, they can impact progress. The Chancellor's call to action, the fortifying glue of unified accreditation, and a vivid and very present case for why we cannot afford to pause this work really does reinforce our need to reimagine, re-energize, and recommit to this really important imperative as an organization, as a thought leader and as a society. And it really does bring us to a point of further decision-making and the renewal of that commitment. And if you want to, I dare say we've been able to dig up all of these studies. So if you're interested in any of them, I'm sure we could share those. Megan and I had quite a lot of conversation about this slide, because the reality is that it's that three-legged stool model. We've had it right in the past when we considered how to structure this work for maximum support. And in fact, given that we are truly more matrix now and under a unified accreditation, it should work even better. We need the priority and progress of this work to not be dependent on any one of us. Indeed, to use that old phrase, it takes a village to do this work, and it's going to take all of us to do it and do it well. It needs to be cemented and integrated into the foundations and practices of how we do what we do across the entire organization. The connections between the universities and the system are critical. The university is the heart of where the discussions and the hard work occurs. The system can support and supplement and complement this work through policy and focus across the system. And you can see within this particular chart that interconnectedness between the two. We encourage you to look at the slide because it does give you an idea of the scope and integrative nature of this work. And indeed, the integrative nature is critical, again, if we're going to be successful with this. As an example of the common element of search, which for academic affairs is enrollment and for human resources is hiring employees, we've been making some great progress. This slide will give you examples, and I'll share with you quickly what we've done on the academic affairs side, and then Megan will jump in with a couple of examples from HR. Within academic affairs, we turned our first attention to admissions and student affairs side. Our current review of the Student Conduct Code is being done with an anti-bias lens, and many thanks to Trustee Eames for being a member of that committee. We recently made the decision to eliminate 2 questions on the admission application related to disciplinary action and felony misdemeanor, and we're implementing various recommendations connected to that decision. And all of our campuses are moving towards test optional, and by that I mean not requiring SAT or ACT scores. And our graduate programs are having a similar discussion. And those are all items that have shown over and over again that bias exists in those kinds of evaluations. And through some very good work of some committees and the work of the campuses, I'm very happy to say that we've been able to make some very quick change in these areas, which I think will be of great benefit to our students.
So as we continue this work, as Rosa had mentioned, it really being a journey, a question always becomes, well, how do we focus with our capacity, with our time, with our resources on the work in a way that it truly will not be neglected, will not be dismantled, and will truly last and have the impact that we're looking for. And so working together with councils to better understand how do you prioritize, because there's not the supposition that any one group would prioritize for everybody. Really, the buckets are around what's relevant, what would continue to strengthen the University of Maine system, and what would facilitate the stewardship. So every one of our councils, every one of our campuses are in different places in their journey. That's not good or bad. That's merely where each campus is and where each campus has decided to be based on what they view are the needs of their communities. And so really the objective is to make sure that we're listening and supporting that implementation where there are obstacles or barriers that campuses are unable to do that for whatever reason, whether that's resources, prioritization, or dedication. So this is this and the next slide, just to be clear, there's a short-term initial proposal and then there's a long-term initial proposal. And again, emphasizing that each of our campuses are in different places along this. So these proposals are based on looking at the aggregate, and then different campuses might slide into different pieces of this. The first piece you see there is to rejuvenate and resource the system-wide steering committee, which based on transitions over the last several years had been on hold. And so there are some structural pieces that we would recommend be in place immediately to ensure that there is the priority. And I think with Chancellor Malloy's focus through the imperative for change, he too felt strongly that we're demonstrating that. And then as you work your way through, you can see that these are organized according to the structure we'd outlined before. And so you can start to see the focus, for instance, on search that President Cummings, you mentioned. Had the pleasure to be working with President Joan Farini Monday too, and other campuses who are similarly focused in this area, and building actually on a white paper that Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, Ryan Lowe, had asked that we in Human Resources create last year. And so we've been working specifically against that. President Cummings, when you mentioned implicit association tests, I pulled up some documents that I could show if we wanted to. I'm also sensitive to time. So, and additionally, if we can shift to the next slide, there's a couple dynamics, there's some on both sides, and one of them has to do with orientation and onboarding. One, our data through our great colleges demonstrates that we really need to focus there anyway, period. And then additionally, you can recruit great talent, and you can recruit diverse, great, just amazing talent. And if the welcome is not there, if the focus is not on retention, if the campuses demonstrate an opposite living experience from welcoming, then the likelihood that we'll be able to retain that is not there. So there's also obviously a major focus on retention. And then and recognizing our core product is academic research and service to our community. And so recognizing that that is our core product for generations to come, it's focusing on ensuring that those pieces are as well inclusive. And so another recommendation would be to focus on the curricular review for campuses who are ready and able at this juncture or at a different place, of really making sure that our curriculum is representative of multiple histories and is representative of a welcoming, inclusive dynamic. So that's the nature of the work that we're in the process of really assessing and prioritizing in conjunction with the councils. And I think that's where I would pause at this point.
And that brings us to the close of our presentation. What you can expect next is more to come on this at an upcoming board meeting, and obviously updates for both HRLR and ASA over the months and years to come as we move forward in this really important and critical work. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other.
Thank you, Rosa.
Any questions?
Thank you, Rosa and Megan. Excellent start.
Any questions? Thank you all very much.
Hey, Rosa, one second. what I'm wondering is, could we set out, do we have direct contact information with the various tribal nations in Maine? Is there a data point? And perhaps I should be calling them and asking to set up meetings of new introduction.
Yep, we have contacts with all of the tribal chiefs, and we have many, many connections with the education coordinators. We work with them quite closely. So I can get you all that information.
Yeah, get it to Rowena and we'll start making some calls.
Yep, absolutely.
I could just briefly build on that. John Bear Mitchell, who is a faculty member at
Yep.
the University of Maine, has also been doing some exciting work in that regard and associated also with the L Fund and other grant dollars coming in. So I think that you'll find there's very warm connections on an ongoing basis as well.
Great job. Great job.
To him too.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Looking back, I guess this is for you, Rosa, because you've lived the whole history, and looking back
Unfortunately.
that had five previous reports or initiatives relating to this. What do you have a sense of why, to the extent that they didn't really make a lot of progress, why is that, and what are we doing differently this time to make sure that we don't repeat that pattern?
Well, and I'd invite anybody who's been here a while to chime in as well. And I think it really is a combination of what we mentioned our presentation, Trustee Irwin. It's a combination of ever-changing faces in leadership positions that were responsible for this. I mean, just from the perspective of the EO officer at the system level, we've had numerous changes there over the last few years, like 8 or 9, well, gosh, like the last 8 years. And then we had several way back. A lack of financial commitment, quite frankly. I believe the budget for this in the last go round was about $7,000. So there was a real lack of financial commitment. And there was a capacity issue. As staffs get ever smaller, it becomes difficult time to maintain even the most robust effort. And I think that played a role in this as well. What I think is different this time, and Megan join in as well, and actually Chancellor Malloy, you as well join in. I think there's a critical imperative. I think that we're becoming better organized at the system level, certainly to do the system level part of this work. The campuses do tremendous work in this area and are so committed to it. And so there's a wonderful opportunity there to have that integrative nature between the two pieces of work come into play. And I think that based on conversations I know that have been had with Jim Thalen and with Ryan, that there's a chance to really think about some funding that might help some of this move along. And I think there's also some grant possibilities out there as well. So in my humble opinion, I think we're better positioned than we have been in the past. And I think the imperative is so much stronger. It should have been strong before, but I think it's absolutely undeniable now. Megan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, just briefly, I would echo all of what you just said. And I would say that there's a wisdom that has been an intentional conversation this time that has to do with stewardship, that all of us are going to retire at some point, and that we need to structurally ensure that this sticks beyond any one of us. And I would also say that on a national and contextual level, there has been a lot more research as to how to ensure that you can do that organizationally. So part of the ways that we're starting definitely is looking into our policies and practices and ultimately building it so that it's not dependent on any one role. So when an organization not only makes it part of the practices and policies, also the rituals of the organization, so that our graduations, our convocations, our structures, our staffing, when you fully integrate it, it becomes more of how you do what you do instead of an extra program on the side. And that's something that Carol Corcoran, who is our interim Chief Human Resources Officer, is also very tuned into and assisting with also. And I would say the diversity councils are very much focused there and wise to that.
So, thank you for that. I guess my only observation would be from a board's perspective that, that we as a board, I think, need to make this a higher priority and the signals that the board sends around an issue like this are important in terms of how people prioritize their time when they have competing demands. And we want to be fully supportive of the chancellor's leadership on this and then the work that all the campuses do. So it needs to be called to our attention when things are flagging, if they are, so that, 6 years from now, another board is looking at a list with another column on it. So we really want to have this become institutionalized. So thank you for your efforts in this regard, and let's move it. Let's cement it in this time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know why I'm trying to hold back grinning, but I am. I'm going to grin from ear to ear. Thank you.
Just in keeping with the chair's comments, perhaps we should report on this 4 times a year to the board. I just do it on a quarterly basis. And to the extent we could capture quarterly employment demographics, particularly for hires, might be a very good way to do it. So not every meeting, but find a way to report on it 4 times a year.
Will do. We'll add it to our work plan, sir.
Great.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Thank you all very, very much. And thank you for your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Megan. I also wanted to echo Chair Irwin's thoughts on this, as well as the Chancellor. So this has been a very good discussion. Thank you all. Robert, I think you're up next with Carolyn.
Yes, thank you. And welcome to the meeting. We can see you now.
Well, it's the benefit of having a couple computers at the house.
Very good. And thanks again to Rosa and Megan for their leadership. Sort of the comment on that last point about, are we going to be able to make progress this time? Absolutely. And I'm so confident because we are already tackling things that would have been taboo to even talk about in the past. The SAT being one, the disciplinary questions on the applications being another, language in our hiring practices. So we are moving this forward quickly, and it's I would say just a willingness of the community and a recognition of the community to be involved. So really happy about that. So I'll roll into an update on enrollment. Enrollment obviously is critical, but it's such a small part of the story this year. Many people have done amazing jobs providing a safe path forward so that our students can stay on track and limit the impact to their futures. Enrollment meant this year more than just getting the students and parents interested. We had to overhaul our class modalities, work to build confidence for everyone that we could pull this off. And I won't belabor that point anymore because you all realize how hard everyone in our communities are working to get through the year of living with COVID. But nationally, I will share that universities and community colleges are down in enrollment. You've seen recently the news, community colleges are hit the most, on average, around 10%, as low as 20%. Numbers coming out of our state, 8 to 9%. Public universities are down an average of 4%, but it really depends on the school for sure, and the location of the school. Rural universities doing a lot worse. Our message, on the other hand, is amazingly positive in my mind. I've said this before that I think it's the best case scenario for us. We're in fact among the top 4% of universities who had near positive enrollment this fall. So I'll walk you through my charts or our dashboards here in a minute for enrollment. Carolyn's going to chime in and share some details on our accelerated online programs. Then I'll switch gears and show you some return rate results, which are also positive. We're real pleased about that progress. And then I'll finish up with a short discussion on where I'm really concerned right now with, and we are already thinking about this, is enrollment for next fall. So let me share my screen. Okay, everybody see that okay? Yes? Okay.
Robert, are you breaking out early college on
Yes.
these? All right, you might want to explain that to the board, what we've done.
Yes, so we, to really make it clear where enrollments are, this is one of our dashboard pages. You can see now when you come to the dashboard, we have fall enrollment, which would be undergrad and grad. We also have early college enrollment. So we separated those enrollment reports for you. Certainly early college is a high priority for us. And so we still track that on a daily basis. That data gets updated every day. Let me go back over to. So this is our undergrad, graduate, and law combined. Let me describe what you're seeing here. The colors represent years. The black line is current year, and then you have 2019 as the red line, just as another point of reference. This is head count, and so we have thousands of students going up the side here. And then what this is a build of enrollment starting at 157 days out from the census day, and you can see that the days increment, and you can see how the enrollment builds over time. The first thing you'll note, as I'll always point out, that the enrollment build trend is very similar from year to year. That's part of the reason we can be so confident that we are on the right trajectory so early. And you can see that at the end, we finished up 0.6% behind last year, which, as I said before, is amazing. And on top of that, there were 225 students that we admitted, that we matriculated, who say they want to come, but they said, you know what, I'm going to take a pass and I'm going to come next fall. So if you were to add those 250 students or 225 students to this, we actually are positive in enrollment. So that's overall. And the story isn't the same across the board. So I'm just going to pick a few positives, and then I'll show you an area of concern. And please stop me. I can, if you want to discuss any of these points. This is UMPI. So you can see they're 13.2% above last year, and absolutely above every other year in the past 5 years, due to a lot of factors. Ray had an emergency this morning. I was going to call him in to share some of those things, but aggressive marketing, ramped up of, and Carolyn will talk about early college or accelerated online, not early college, our AP partner programs and the results there. Then I'll share UM and USM on the graduate side. Another positive story here. So USM and UM, we had graduate enrollment increase of 8.6%. And you can see that they were ahead the entire time, just absolute stellar performance across the board there. Let me reselect everyone so I can show you an area of concern that we are addressing. So undergrad, first year, and as a reminder, these dashboards are online, so you all can do this anytime. They're updated daily. We look at them daily, and we actually meet twice a week for COVID updates across the system, and we walk through these together. So undergrad first years, what this really is our, and I also did in-state. This is our main students coming out of high schools. You can see that we were trending on track and slightly positive all the way up until the markets crashed and we really understood the impact of COVID. And then it just, the confidence, you can see just flatlined. Again, there is a gap of 200 and some students there. I guess that's 320 students. 125 of those in Maine deferred. So we did admit them, matriculate them. They're going to come back hopefully next year. So that gap does shrink a bit, but we certainly not where we wanted to be, being 10% down and with deferrals somewhere in the 6% range. So Dan Demerit will report this later, but the chancellor has charged him with a number of marketing initiatives. We are, Chancellor and I and Dan and others are working with all the enrollment leaders to rethink and reach out to our Maine students to
the way
correct
that the light energy is captured has to do with the electrons.
Whoops. That was very interesting, Emma. I'm glad you found your mute button. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share on enrollment. I'm going to switch over to return rate and take questions before I start this conversation. Okay, so a bit of recap on our return rate initiative. First year persistence, 4-year graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate, you're probably familiar with those terms. Those are nationally standardized measures. The problem with those measures for us, and the reason they are so hard to move the needle on, is they are a very narrowly defined cohort of students. So they are the first time in college students only. It doesn't capture graduates, it doesn't capture adults or transfers. So, you know, schools like UMA, where they may only have 70 or some students coming each year that fit that cohort, that measure just does not represent what they're doing in terms of student success. So we moved to a return rate. And what that simply is if a student comes to us last fall, how many of them returned this fall? And because we are so broadly defining it, we can break those down into every student can now have a return rate. So what we have done here, and I'm going to focus on the bottom table, is we broke those down to when, and this is just undergrad for a reference. We also have graduate and in other tabs at the top if you're interested later. But for our graduate students, those who came last year with 0 college credits, 53% of them returned. Those who had 1 to 29 had 66.5% returned. So you can see, and then after that, most of the students stay with us. And then of course we have graduation impact where students are graduating and not coming back in those remaining years. So what this is really illustrating is those first 2 years is where we lose the bulk of our students if we're going to lose them, and then we pretty much keep them if they stay past that. So Rosa this is one of her key roles, has kicked off a number of initiatives. And in fact, just wrapped up last week a system-wide advising summit that was really well received, some national speakers and so forth. But throughout the year, they have been meeting and working. And I will show you that those efforts did actually pay off. So at the top, you'll notice that there's fall term. The way this is referenced is in 2019, what are the return rates for this year? So So 2019 is actually our current response. 2018, so you can see that we are up 2 points in the no college credit to return and about the same in the 1 to 30 credits to return. So nice work there. Any questions on that data? Okay, so the last thing I want to share is concern about applications. So we are already thinking about next fall, and our pressing challenge is that we will continue to suffer fatigue. And this is the real big unknown. So we have figured out a way to safely operate in COVID. Where we're not sure is the continued operation, what will happen to just the psyche of our students, faculty, and staff over time. So, you know, as we continue to live with COVID, the economic realities possibly could get worse. People are definitely more isolated now, and we would expect depression to increase. And we've already heard from students. I mean, they're yearning for a more social college experience. So the national conversation on this is a worry that students will even more next year take a gap year to wait this thing out. So, and the chancellor said this a number of times, and this is part of the message we're trying to get out to our high school advisors and students and even parents, is that this is the worst time to take a gap year. Normally, students taking a gap year would travel, work, build their social networks. None of those things are going to be easy for them to do. So essentially, this will be a pause in their potential career progression with nothing to show. So continuing their education is the right path, even if it's different. And so that, you know, a year from now, once we're back to whatever the new normal is, they're not behind. But I will go back. Oh, and I was sharing my screen. I'm sorry. So on applications, we also update this daily. I know that's something that you are interested in us doing, being more active with our data, something that we share weekly as well. That's overall, just a few days ago, and we had a weekend, so there's a bit of a gap from that, but we're down overall on applications. The thinking is the high schools came in late. They have lots of things they're doing to scramble, keeping up with their own COVID environments. The high school advisors, some of them that we've talked to, just haven't been operating on the same schedule. They've got to figure out ways to sit down with students. Normally that would happen as soon as they come into the high schools to start talking about college, and all of those conversations are delayed. So while we're behind overall, again, we are very concerned with in-state first years. This is not even behind. This is a troubling, I would say, a super cause for concern. So the black line again is this year. This is the number of applications we've received up the left-hand column. And this is the days away from next fall is the start of next year. So you can see that we're behind the last 5 years. We're 62% behind last year at this point in time. So again, more to come at the board meeting and others, and you read a little bit about it yesterday in your message from the chancellor, that lots of initiatives underway to correct this as fast as we can.
Hey, Robert.
Yes, sir.
Could you put up the number of applications completed versus acceptances or decisions? Just my other great concern for in-state.
So another thing that we track, as the chancellor is pointing out, is the applications at every stage. So we have, of the 604 in-state first-year applications, 336 of them are complete. And what that means is the students have done everything they need to do. They sent in their transcripts or essays or anything that we've asked for them. The Shared Processing Center has deemed those applications ready to be decided upon. And then you can see that of the 336, we have 162 applications sitting, waiting for an admissions decision. And we had 174 of them that have already been admitted. And you can see the matriculation queue here as well. So in addition to these numbers to see the counts, we also do aging that we track closely to see how fast we are making those decisions in between those queues. But was there a point you wanted to make on this slide, sir?
Yeah, the point is that those no decisions, I call them our ambassadors. We need to get them notified that they've been admitted because the vast majority are going to be admitted. And the sooner they do it, the more likely they are to have a positive impact on the high school that they come from or the program that they're participating in. So we are we are discussing quite frequently trying to get those decisions made faster and faster and faster, particularly on in-state students.
Absolutely. And those were the data that I wanted to share.
Robert, did you want me to?
Oh, sorry, Carolyn. Go, yeah, my apologies.
Do you want to continue to share your screen with that one slide, or I don't know if I have the ability there.
Yes.
So I'm just going to add a little bit about enrollment with the 3 schools that are working with AP on accelerated online programs. So for anyone that is new to the conversation or newer to the conversation, AP is Academic Partnerships, an online program management company that we entered into an agreement with a couple of years ago for some very select programs, again, accelerated online. There are 3 campuses currently working with AP, USM, UMFK on some nursing and education programs, and UMPI with undergraduate CBE or competency-based programs. So for those that aren't new to the conversation, I think we could all agree that initial enrollments for the first year with AP were a bit light, much lower than we had hoped. And if you're looking at it's the same type of data that Robert offered earlier. You can see the red line would be the 2019 numbers. The black line would be the current 2020. And this is as of census, October 15th. So in the previous year, there was a total of 60 enrollments offered at all 3 campuses by AP. This year at census, we have a total of 490. So clearly there's been some improvement. If you break it down by the campus, USM went from 13 to 184, UMFK from 26 to 157, and UMPI from 21 to 149. So really some very good improvement from fall 2019 to fall 2020. Again, there's been a lot with more programs coming online, with there being a bit more communication about the types of marketing efforts and retention efforts that we are working on AP with, but also the fact that I think with some of the programs, they're finally starting to get a bit larger reach with their marketing dollars and into some very specific target markets. I am pleased to announce that it has increased and is up to 490, but in all honesty, as encouraging it is, I do feel there is still quite a bit of room for improvement, and the numbers are below where we had hoped to have them even at year 1. And so we're going to continue to work on that. It's a priority for me to meet with AP, and I've started to meet with the 3 campuses so that we can make sure that we're aligning our efforts and increasing enrollment as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks for speaking up. And that's our report, Chair Eames.
Thank you. Any questions or observations or thoughts? I guess thank you for this presentation. Sort of a mixed bag, it seems like, I guess. But I think I'm hearing you say that we're so far off because really the high schools probably don't have their advising programs totally in place, maybe because of COVID. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how alarming these numbers are. How are the high schools doing? I mean, every high school in the state, it seems like is a little bit different. So how are their advising going, and what are some explanations?
So certainly, I didn't mean to say that was the reason. That is one thing we're speculating on, reaching out, and it would be different per each of the different districts and so forth. But in general, it's across the board where more of our students are deferring than the out-of-state students and so forth. So, community conversations, deeper impact on our economy. I mean, it could be a number of things. Although those may be the reasons, we are prepared to be tackling it at full force, whatever they are. So reaching out to our superintendent partners, reaching directly out to the students and parents. And again, you're going to hear more about some of the initiatives where Dan and the enrollment leaders are standing up some, I think in November, some 30 nights to help students complete applications. We're partnering with FAME to also complete the FAFSA right online. So give us 30 minutes and we'll help you complete your app and your financial aid, and to have those initial quick conversations with those students. We're speeding up our financial aid offer time so that they can get their offers quicker. There's just a number of things that we're doing to address that. But it is peculiar that it seems to be a very Maine focused decline.
And if you don't mind, I do have one more question. Going off, well, I'll hold that for later. Does anybody else have any questions?
I'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, as the point of Maine high schools, I think you're absolutely right. They're kind of all over different color schemes, from red, fully remote, to a yellow, which is partial, and then the schools are lucky to be green. You will see green model as sort of a normal school day, and you will have that counseling in effect. But if you have a lot of schools end up going red here a little quick, if in the next few months, it's probably the worst time, because this would be the time that we really want to get our kids involved. Talking with Dan, I did recommend an out-of-the-box way of thinking of getting kids to sign early and having it done FaceTime, remote, Zoom, any kind of opportunity to get into the families together with mom and dad, and just reassure that attending the University of Maine system is a good investment in your future, and even in bad times such as this COVID that we're up against, that is still good. And I think having those different modes of attacking registrations and applications and making it a lot easier than what it ever was before would be great during COVID too. So.
What I would say too is that we need to use this experience to permanently change how we admit, when we admit, and what their package looks like substantially earlier. With respect, are we discussing this further later, Robert, or should I just talk about that?
Go for it.
So traditionally, we've been telling people what their financial package would look like in March or April. And that just, so we did a survey, I had Dan do a survey of publics and privates in New England. And what we discovered is ourselves and UConn were outliers in being late. And quite frankly, we don't have the applications that UConn has, and one of the schools that we compete with even more closely is UNH. Basically tells students at the time of acceptance what their package is going to look like. So we have gone from, we have now established December 1st as the date that we would like to be able to tell people what their packages would look like based on, with plenty of proviso language. It's based on what the legislature does. It's based on our federal adjustments, because there's always a slight adjustment every year. And we think that that may produce more rapid decision-making and quite frankly, hopefully, fewer late applications to other institutions that we compete with when people understand what their package would look like from us. That's a very important move. If you think of that along with taking out some of the questions and streamlining our applications, and now talking about 30 days and evenings of applications online in cooperation with FAME to get the financial documents filled out so that we can do that. I think this could have a long-term effect. The other thing I would note is that our efforts last year, including on retention around reaching out to students to allow them to take a makeup failure course and other steps that we've taken, was having a very good effect on retention and on the number of people wanting to come to our universities until the gigantic downturn in the economy and all of our schools going online. And then on the Maine side, we lost more students than others, our out-of-state students. And I can only imagine that is reflective of different circumstances in Maine, or quite frankly, a view of a college education in Maine and versus some of our other states. Maybe this is something that could be deferred. So we're going to try to overcome that. So this is a comprehensive re-examination of how we interact with non-admitted students and how we get them to be admitted and then to come to us.
Thank you, Chancellor. Have we changed the way in which we notify students that they have been accepted?
I've offered to personally call them.
How are we doing it now?
That's one of my frustrations. I heard from an admissions person that they couldn't send acceptances for this particular university in our system because they didn't have the swag to go along with the acceptance, and so that was being delayed. They were actually delaying notifying people that they were going to be accepted because they didn't have some of the stuff they wanted to put in the acceptance package. That's unacceptable. We want to be the first school to admit, particularly people from Maine. We want to be the first person to admit them. We want to be the first person to tell them what their package is going to look like. And we want to be the first person to have them matriculate. So it is a work in progress. But we do in fact and have historically sat on decisions and not made them public, that is to the applicant, as quickly as we could have. And we need to change that.
Are we still sending letters, or is there?
Can
they go online?
All 163 of those Maine applicants, which I call ambassadors, I would call them today if I had the numbers. It's a different way to look at it. And then, quite frankly, we need to have all of that stuff ready to go much earlier in the season. And so we'll permanently adjust that as well.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are they learning that they've been accepted through the U.S. mail or online?
U.S. mail.
It is still U.S. mail. Okay.
I'm taking that one on.
Good. Good. Anyone else? All right, then I think at this point, Robert, it's you on programs for examination.
Yes, and thank you. So programs for examination began a number of years ago. I recognize that many of you on this committee have seen it for quite a few years. But we implemented it as a way to identify and track just our lowest enrolled programs, or programs that with really insufficient numbers of faculty to provide the level of quality we require. So the numbers of programs on the the PFE sheets were just a few at each institution. Since then, we've grown the PFE into a process that includes all of our programs to allow us to not only see the struggling programs, the ones we have to shine the light on to improve, but to show programs that are in all stages of maturity. So the healthy programs could be in a phase of transforming, maintaining, or growing. And unified accreditation highlights this need for this type of process, allowing us to have a full picture of our academic portfolio, where we're going and what we're fixing together. The PFE process, just to give you a synopsis, it's not a one-time event. It happens all year. PFE process begins in August, and that's where the System IR staff, they compile most of the data, the enrollments and credit hours and those kinds of things. And then that data is shared with the CAOs. They then, now that we've sort of enhanced what we collect, the CAOs work with their academic leaders to fill in the additional information that we don't capture in our data systems, and I'll show you some of that here in a minute. In November, I and the CAOs have meetings and talk about their plans for their programs, both the struggling and the growing in particular. And then I share the data at the full board coming up. And then in March, the CAOs present their academic plans based on this information. They tell you where they're going and what they're fixing and what they're improving and those kinds of things. So let me share my screen. And again, at this stage, we have the data in fairly final form, not quite ready to share, but it will all be shared with you just in a few weeks in November. But I wanted to share at least what we're collecting. So scrolling down here first, we have all of the programs. You can see the university to the side, the academic grouping, the academic departments, the program names. We have the distinct count of majors in those and degrees conferred for the appropriate year you see at the top, 2018-19. And if I scroll down, you can browse through this list and you can see all of our programs, their enrollments, and so forth. What would, and just didn't fit nicely into the board book, you can see that we have some columns for it. What you'll see in November is additional columns out to the side and data rolling down this way for all of these other fields. So the number of FTE faculty, the credit hours generated, the DFWL rates for the program, that's the percent where students are earning those grades in the program, percent of faculty with terminal degree, so you can understand the percentage of the faculty who should be in the program with that correct degree. Budget information, the amount spent on research, faculty salaries, budget on that they have for maintenance and operation in their department, and then some advisor information and degree prereq and co-req information. These four really are things that we're going to need to be able to describe to NETCHI and our accreditation self-study, particularly these two are requirements where we're being transparent about our curriculum maps and our learning outcomes. Those are a part of the assessment standard. So we're starting to think ahead in terms of a unified approach to being able to report information to NETCHI in a few years. And then the final thing on here, this year's PFE is a self-assessment of the strategy for the program, and that's what I referenced before. In what stage is the program grow, transform, maintain, or sunset, so that we can look at our programs together, and this will greatly aid our discussions about strategic planning in the coming months. And that's what I wanted to share today. Again, more to come at the full board meeting. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Robert, if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to see you.
Hi. It's looking like this process is pretty widely driven by quantitative data, things you can really write down, how many people are graduating, those sort of percentages and stuff. I'm wondering if there's been any sort of qualitative influence on this, maybe asking students how they feel about programs, talking to facilitators, things like that.
They're actually, we have a full review of the programs that happens on a regular cycle that includes that type of the analysis and external input and that kind of thing. But I really do love the idea. And that was one thing, that last self-assessment strategy column that we added. Certainly the percent of faculty with terminal degree is an indication of quality. The fact that they're describing the degree online is a good thing for the program. So it's a good thing for the students so they can understand what they need to do to graduate. But you're exactly right. We should add some input from the students, and love the idea, and we will take that back to the CAOs.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So a couple of additional data points that occur to me looking at a very extensive list of items that you're looking at, which I think is all of which are valid. And thinking about board outcomes, we have, and thinking about the things that the Alphon grant in the student success area is going to be looking at. I wonder if this would be an appropriate time to start tracking research opportunities, to start tracking experiential learning opportunities, and to start tracking, if not at the program level, maybe it's at the department level, but which of our departments are engaged in an identifiable way with employers or industries, so that we can see, how are we institutionalizing for the long term this continuous feedback between employer and institution, so that our programs are constantly being kind of refreshed as to their relevance. And I'm wondering if we can start inventorying those data points as part of this, because those are also relevant, at least in my view, to program quality, longevity, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I'll bring that back, CAOs for discussion too. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then I will turn the program over to David Demers for discussion on Brightspace.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Ames, and good morning, everyone. I know we're running behind schedule, so I will be brief in my comments. Hopefully you can see the screen. Many of you are already aware that we have made the call to switch or transition our learning management system from Blackboard over to Brightspace. So I'm here to provide an update on that progress and the overall project and how it went. You might recall that we did do an RFP to identify a modern learning management system that would be mobile friendly, cloud enabled, stable, and provide more opportunities to better leverage the learning management system. And at the end of the day, we selected Brightspace from Desire to Learn. When we selected the platform, we established a very aggressive timeline to try to get this in place to support all fall programming for this current fall term. I'm pleased to report that we did make that milestone, but it did require some effort, and we had a few small challenges, a few small hiccups. Some of you may have heard of the pandemic that's going on that got in the way in our implementation timeline. We also committed about $1.4 million in one-time support for campuses to support their ability to convert courses from Blackboard over to Brightspace and to actually bring on some temp staff to help out faculty training efforts across the board. I did present some of the key benefits to Brightspace at a prior Board of Trustees meeting. I'm just noting them here, including the platform being more flexible, primarily being mobile friendly. It is a mobile enabled platform. So what you see on the screen re-renders depending on the screen size that you're using. So you get the same experience whether you are on a laptop, a desktop, or a mobile device, which makes it much more accessible for most of our students that may be on the move or have connectivity challenges. It is also a highly stable platform. It's running in the cloud. We have updates that are pushed to the platform as opposed to Blackboard, where we had to bring the system down, schedule downtime to do and perform upgrades on that platform. This one gives us much more confidence that we can keep the system up and running long term. It also enables for significant use of APIs for data integrations and the use of tools and apps that are easily plugged in and configurable within the platform. And the one that I'm most excited about is that we have more direct access to the underlying data architecture in Brightspace, meaning that we can perform more robust learning analytics and analysis on how students are using the platform and where they may be having some challenges. In terms of where we are today, I'm listing a few things that are milestones in our implementation timeline. I mentioned the pandemic. We were planning on having an in-person symposium for faculty to get a better sense of how Brightspace works, using faculty that had taught pilot courses in prior terms, sharing their experiences. That in-person event, we had to pivot, obviously, as everyone was shifted to remote work and learning in an online environment. So we conducted a virtual symposium that was intended by almost 1,000 faculty and staff across the system in May. That was highly successful, great feedback on that, and it really served as a springboard for us to move forward with our plan to get everything up and running for fall. We completed our full integration with Main Street via the APIs. That seems like an easy task, but it was a major pain point for faculty in the Blackboard environment because it would take overnight synchronization of the two systems before enrollments would be reflected in the learning management system. That now is not an issue. This is real time. If a student is enrolled by the registrar in a Main Street course section, within the hour, they will appear in the Brightspace course section. So direct synchronization is a key outcome that we were hoping to get through this implementation process. In addition, we converted or migrated all of our Blackboard Learning Management System courses through summer 2020. Those are now available in Brightspace, at least the content of those courses, so faculty can go in and make those Brightspace enabled, if you will. We also completed the integration of a number of third-party tools or plugins, such as Zoom, Kaltura for video recording, Google, YouTube, NetTutor. At the end of the day, we completed about 30 third-party plugins and made those enabled within the Brightspace learning environment. So I'm going to just spill the beans and tell you that we successfully launched Brightspace as our official learning management system in full on August 31st. It was somewhat anticlimactic because we couldn't really have a celebratory event, but at the end of the day, we did meet this milestone despite the challenges posed by the pandemic and the number of folks that were involved on the core team also having to assist faculty when we shifted to remote instruction in the spring. That diverted their attention away from getting Brightspace up and running to helping those faculty get their courses online in Blackboard for the remainder of the spring term. So I can't overstate this. This was a full team effort. We could not have pulled this off without the core team, which had representation across the system. These folks were instrumental and diligent and resilient in their efforts to help us to get Brightspace launched and up and running for this fall term. So thank you to all the presidents for allowing these folks to participate in the process and helping us get there. In terms of what is on the roadmap for next steps, we are continuing to refine and develop the user roles and permissions that folks have in the environment. We are sunsetting the Blackboard Learning Management System. In fact, as of yesterday, I believe we no longer have direct access to Blackboard. We have back-end access if we need to get any data out of it, but Blackboard is no longer accessible to us That system has been shut down. We are currently planning a governance structure to promote and support the use of the Brightspace platform going forward. And this is something that I'm working on with Dr. Placido and the Organizational Effectiveness Office, and hope to have something in hand and up and running, hopefully by the time we reach the spring semester, just to get the ball rolling with that. In addition, I mentioned the learning analytics. Having more direct access to the data that sits behind Brightspace is a key outcome that we were hoping to gain. So now we can do aggregate level reporting that is available and accessible directly to campuses and departments on campuses. So this is just an example, seemingly simple, but this is just showing a snapshot of the number of courses where the faculty went in and said, make this course active or accessible to students in the Brightspace environment. You see 3 data points here. The 12th, which was 2 weeks after the semester started, the 26th, which was right before the add drop date, and then most recently last week. And again, this is the type of data that we really struggle to be able to extract and obtain out of the Blackboard environment, but at least gives us an indicator of those courses where the faculty may have forgotten to turn or activate their course for the students to have access to it. So now we can see that in a real-time report and reach out to those faculty and remind them to please make their course accessible. Here's another one, enrollments, same 3 data points. And you can see once we hit the add drop period, we did see a small drop in the number of enrollments in courses. And then this is the one that I think is most intriguing from a retention perspective. So here we're able to go in and see which students have not logged in the activity at a point in time in the Brightspace course. So this information was provided to the local campus instructional design teams. I believe they worked with their advising offices to proactively outreach to students and say, is there an issue? Can we help you? Why haven't you logged into Brightspace? And what we see is that we get a reduction in the number of students that have not logged any activity in Brightspace as a result of some of that proactive outreach. So this is all going to be critical to help us promote and support student success across the board going forward. In terms of what's next, we will continue to build out a reporting data mart that will give campuses full access to not only campus level data, but also school and department level data. And that was, again, a pain point that we had in Blackboard. Everything was in one big bucket, so we couldn't break it down into more granular levels. So we now have that ability to do so in Brightspace. We're also working on making full grading integration with Main Street, meaning faculty will be able to conduct their or manage their gradebook in Brightspace. And at the midterm and at the end of the semester, they can actually have those grades pushed into Main Street on their behalf, as opposed to having to go in and re-enter them into Main Street. We're also working and looking at how to best deploy the Brightspace Learning Outcomes tool. We talked, you heard Dr. Placido talk about program outcomes. This is going to be a key tool that we'll be able to use within the learning management system to help track achievement of students for these learning outcomes. And then the last item on the list is we are working toward deploying what's called the Brightspace Course Merchant. And this is going to allow for non-university personnel to have access to non-credit program offerings. So this is a key thing that the cooperative extension folks were looking for, and just an opportunity to expand our community engagement efforts, including at the law school across the board. So lots going on, but the theme of this is that we hit this milestone despite the challenges, and we have that a very aggressive timeline, and I couldn't be more proud of the entire team coming together and rallying to get us to the end point. But we are now live in a new learning management system. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
David, this is Mike. I have a couple of questions. When you talk about the governance structure, you're also working with a community college system on that. That's my first question. The second one is, are the centers all connected to Brightspace as well?
And let me make sure I heard the first question. Were you asking if we are following or working with the community colleges on?
Yeah, you're talking about the governance structure. Are the community college involved in that as well, or?
Not directly at this point. However, we have been lockstep in the deployment plan with the community college. In fact, they are on the leading edge of moving forward with Course Merchant, for instance. So we're lagging behind them on that one, and we hope to learn from their experience in making these non-credit courses available for the community. Not so much in the governance approach. Our governance needs to, I think, be a little distinct from what the community colleges might deploy, simply because we have more nuanced layers in terms of our organizational structure and lots of history around prior ownership with the Blackboard environment. So we have a lot of work to do to get a workable governance structure in place, but I'm happy to share with them and let them know what our pain points are and what we came to actually see as benefits with the governance structure we wind up with. And then the second point was the centers.
Yes.
Yeah, they all have access to the Brightspace environment as well.
They have access to it. Are they all hooked up yet? Do you know? The ones at the university actually owns the actual centers?
The programming that's offered through the centers that appears in the Main Street catalog, all of those course sections are now running in Brightspace.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's Betsy. I have a question. My question is, it was interesting seeing the variability among the different campuses. Do you actually have that information? I would assume you have that information down to a course level. And is there an opportunity to share best practices? Obviously, some professors do a fabulous job immediately getting their students online. In what are they teaching their students, or how are they delivering that information? And those, I suspect probably if you got real granular, you'd find that there's some professors that have a higher percentage of their students that perhaps they're not followed up with. So is there a way to share best practices, not only among professors within a campus, but across the system? And is that a wrong assumption, maybe?
No, that's a great assumption. We do have pockets of faculty who are taking full advantage of what the system has to offer and seeing the benefits as a result. So I mentioned the Brightspace Virtual Symposium that we did in May. I think we're looking to reschedule something like that over the winter break in preparation for the spring term. So this would be an opportunity to invite faculty that have had success with Brightspace, particularly with retaining and helping students be successful on the platform, sharing what they did, those best practices, and making that available to instructors across the system. I think my goal is to establish a community of practice where faculty do have a forum, not just on their own campus, but across the system, to be able to share these best practices and learn from one another, because we know that there are some great faculty that are making tremendous use of the platform and having great success. So we want to broadcast and publicize that as much as possible.
I'm also thinking of the accountability to those that may, be slower to adopt, and that making sure that we have that level of accountability in there as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Great work.
This is Trustee McMahon. Looking at your slide headed Learn and Know Activity, and I'm seeing that as of last week, we probably had a little over 1,000 students who had no activity on Brightspace. Is this an early warning sign of students who may be dropping out? Are there some names associated there that we could use and feed back to the college, to the universities, and help them outreach the students so they don't drop out? Be interested in your comments and Dr. Placido's comments.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's what we did. So that report that we ran on the 12th, that was done to feed that information to the local campuses, to do that proactive outreach to students, to say, is there an issue? Can we help you out? Are you experiencing any connectivity challenges? That type of thing. And we did see a significant drop in the number of learners that did not have any activity logged in Brightspace. Now, there will always be a small gap. There may be active Brightspace courses where the instructors just aren't using it for all that much. So there's nothing for the students to do. So they won't go in and log in. But that gets to Betsy's point. We need to share with faculty best practices and why it is important that we have ongoing weekly activities that the students can engage in, not only so that we can track the progress of the students, but just encouraging them to develop best practices and success strategies for their own academic career. And then I will point out, I have the little asterisk there. You'll see a slight uptick at Fort Kent and USM in the report that was on the 18th. And again, that's just a remnant of the fact that we just this week opened the second semester, or the second half of the semester for our academic partnership students. So those students, the course shells were there, but there was nothing for them to do because the second term had not started yet. So I didn't strip those out because I didn't have enough time to modify the query. But that's why you see a small uptick at Fort Kent and USM. The report ran as of the 18th.
David, it's Janine from USM. I know you're screen sharing, so many of you can't see me, but I wanted to just respond to Trustee McMahon's question. Because of COVID, I think many of the academic administrators on campuses encouraged faculty to set up a Brightspace shell for every course, even if that course was going to be meeting online. So in the event that we had to shut down again, every course would have a Brightspace shell. Now, I know not every faculty member did that, but I also know there are some faculty members who created a Brightspace shell, but they're teaching online, and they will just move into that Brightspace learning environment in the event that we have to go remote again, or they might start using it when we shut down the residence halls at Thanksgiving.
And I would like to also offer just one other piece of information is sometimes when a course is linked to a lab, the faculty person may only use the course and not the lab component. They'll just put all the information into one space, one place for the students. So that also can show some effects where then they're not accessing one of the areas, and it's because they're connected in the course, not the lab. Thank you.
And because you asked me to, my comment is that absolutely activity is correlated to engagement, and engagement is correlated to success. So activity is an indicator that good companies who do early warning systems like EAB use as an early warning indicator. And now that David is, and that's one of the goals of this foundationally, restructuring all those things, and David's group has set us up in a good way for future success.
I have a quick question about oversight for professors. Like we know the rates at which students are engaged on the site, but do we know about what the rate for professors is? Because I know anecdotally from a lot of students, I've been hearing that for their classes, there are a lot of examples of times when professors just aren't even using Brightspace, and especially looking into a time when we're all going to be online for our classes, I think it's especially important that we have that sort of oversight for professors as well. I didn't know if you had data on that or anything or something to that nature.
Yeah, I think that gets to Trustee Tim's point about the accountability piece, and we absolutely have that data as well. So we not only know how active faculty are in their Brightspace course shells, but we can actually determine how many assignments they posted, how many opportunities for engagement are available in their courses. And the more that we can correlate that increase in engagement opportunity with student success, the better off we're going to be able to convince faculty that they should make that effort to get in there and use the platform.
Well, any other questions or observations?
As a follow-up question with your comment about the AP session courses, is there ways to basically eliminate or not include courses that have not started yet? Because I noticed, like at UMM, for example, we had several courses that started on September 28th, just a little bit of a later starting. And I suspect that's some of the drop that we saw there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a first, that analysis that I shared was done in just in Excel, pulling data out of the raw extracts. We're still working out how to structure that data mart. It includes pulling data from Brightspace and merging it with information in Main Street. So for instance, in Brightspace, we don't have the start and end dates of the courses defined. We have to pull that out of Main Street. And it requires a little bit of finagling to match those two things to put into the data mart. But at the end of the day, we will be able to slice and dice it at that granular level to say, show me all the courses that started on this day, how many students logged in on that day, how many faculty activated the course, all of that.
As sort of a second one, I know as an instructor teaching there's the learner preview and the grade book. Is that a quote person in the class that would be pulled in with this information that there's no activity with?
That is a great question. Potentially, I think we have a separate role for them, but I need to verify that that is in fact the case.
That's the kind of thing that we were trying to address in a data. We're going off into weeds a bit, but I'll share that we have a data advisory committee and a data governance group, and that's the kind of thing we were trying to address by having better identification of the instructor of record, and that process was kicked off last year, where we might have 5 people associated to a course in our data systems as an instructor, but only really one of them is the instructor, and the others are, as you say, their assistants, or maybe it's the chair who likes to pop in and that kind of thing. So we have a way to designate that in Main Street now. Whether that's going up to Brightspace, David and I can follow up later.
Okay. Turning now to Kim Jenkins and organizational effectiveness.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will jump right in by sharing my screen with you. Wonderful. So I'm delighted to be here to share some thoughts with you about in particular, some current projects that our office is working on. And I'll just start by mentioning that organizational effectiveness has been embedded in the University of Maine system since 2012. And the Office of OE currently includes myself and Christine Doucette, who is based in Augusta, and Samantha Kramer, who is based here with me at the University of Maine campus. And while I'm here today to share some of the exciting work that our departments are doing, I absolutely must start by also sharing with you my appreciation for the dedication and expertise of these incredible women. We're very lucky to have them working with our teams. OE serves as internal consultants. We partner with teams and individuals to offer objective perspective throughout our system. And the experience that we have is in organizational design and process improvement. Our mission is to challenge and inspire and transform the sponsors and the teams with whom we work. The graphic on this slide shares a glimpse of the type of work we do. You could look at the graphic in another way with structure and systems and processes as well, and perhaps with people stretching throughout the organization, because that's really how we look at our organization. And much of the work that we have done over the years has been in person, but since March, our workload has actually increased because the time we're saving by not driving between campuses has allowed us to take on more projects. And also, I would say that I think that the moving to an online format and a work from home format has greatly increased the interest and willingness of some of the teams with whom we work to actually do this work online. So it's been a great silver lining, I think, in this time. I appreciate this chance to pause and share with you a glimpse of some of the work that our team has been supporting. And I will highlight for you two of the projects that we're working on right now. But first, I'm going to share with you just a brief note about each of the following items in order to give you a sense of the reflective and intentional efforts that our departments take on. Usually when OE is asked to help, it is because the project or the combination of teams working on a project mean that having a third and objective party can help facilitate the team's goals. We support smaller teams when we can, although we do prioritize in ways that allow us to focus on institutional efforts, including those that advance unified accreditation and the Board of Trustees' strategic priorities. Last spring, we participated in the Substantive Change Report, and as well as other efforts, including the UA website, and will continue to support efforts of the Chancellor and the senior leadership team, all of the presidents moving forward. There are several projects here that are ongoing or in one case recently completed, where teams took part in some level of mapping or making the processes visible. Often our processes can get added onto, like adding rooms onto a house, and the end product doesn't always make sense. Making work visible is a great way to identify challenges and opportunities and eventually to create an improved process. And process improvements can be particularly powerful because teams come together to design processes that make sense for their students and free up their own time, which really allows them to reinvest that time in working with students and each other in ways that create value. Some of the projects that I would like to just mention briefly are here. Last winter, we began work with the University of Maine at Farmington, looking at identifying and mapping their course scheduling process. We are currently involved in a sort of an ongoing project with USIT and procurement, looking at the process involved in creating RFPs to make sure that that is as fluid as possible. Earlier in the year, we did work with UMPI and the student financials team and had an opportunity to see all that goes on in their department and make recommendations for improvement. Pending and coming soon will be some work with the University of Maine School of Law, which we're excited about, to look at the student experience and do some process mapping there. That will be a lot of fun as well. And currently, the team is working on, with the admission, with a team looking at the CRM software and doing a SWOT or a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to identify the software that makes sense for all of our system. And the last two that are listed here in this section, the undergraduate application process and the duplicate EMPL IDs, I'm going to talk a little bit more about on the following slides. Just quickly, I'll mention that our teams also, we've been working with several teams to help them work through strategic planning efforts, including the University of Maine Lobster Institute, governance models, including Brightspace, which David Demers just referenced. Of course, we also do work with summits, including the BOT-BOV Summit, which is coming soon on November 2nd. And then we have several instances of executive coaching where we work and serve as objective internal consultants and thought partners for several of our senior leaders and leaders throughout the system in ways that just allow us to think through different opportunities. We also work with teams to conduct after action reviews and facilitate input strategies, which could involve surveys or focus groups. And currently we are relaunching our training, which has been dormant for a little while, but the opportunity and the timing is such that we can now relaunch training. This has been redeveloped by Christine and Sam to lead to a certification for continuous improvement specialists. And this is a fantastic opportunity for employees and staff, faculty and staff who want to be to see this as a professional development opportunity, but also to provide greater support for teams in supporting unified accreditation throughout our campuses. Elements of this particular work, the UMS undergraduate application process and disciplinary question review, have been reported on previously. It is an exciting example of bringing together teams to improve the experience, in this case with a focus on equity, best practices, and the impact on prospective and current students and our communities. The team did recommend to remove the questions up front from the applications, which will allow applications to be processed more quickly, and for those staff who reviewed the questions to spend more time directly supporting other admission and recruitment efforts. This work does continue, and the implementation team is currently looking at the places where it does make sense to include the questions, including housing applications and academic programs where it makes sense. So that work does continue. Even though the chart listed here, shown here, gives an example of the savings that will take place on the front end, some of that time will be invested in by other departments, and so it's not a true savings in terms of the staff time, but it does make the application process go quicker. And there were other benefits to the process as well, to the recommendation. Anyone who has been employed or taken a course with UMS since the inception of PeopleSoft has been assigned an EMPL ID and maybe more than one. Sometimes students become employees and employees become students. Sometimes students apply to one of our campuses and reapply years later. There are processes to catch and prevent the creation of what are known as duplicate EMPL IDs, but the processes vary and are not always followed. And so the result is that, well, currently you can see there that there are nearly 12 or 11,000 possible duplicate cases. When a person has more than one ID, it means that any one ID might not tell the whole story about their experience, and tracking down and cleaning up each case takes a great deal of time and detective work. And the Data Governance Council is now the sponsor of this project, and the goal is to revise and enhance duplicate processes, to clean up the thousands of already existing IDs, and then to create processes that make sense, that folks, that our teams will be able to follow moving forward, so that we don't get to that point in the future. With that, I'm going to pause, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or I say any questions. Some of the work that is ongoing is sensitive, and so in preparing what to bring to you, I wanted to be careful about how much I share, because while it's exciting to share work that is currently happening, and I wanted to do that, some of it is also currently happening, and so there is a sensitive element to the work we do. But with that said, I am happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions?
Good work.
Thank you. The teams have been very busy this spring and summer.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim. That is very interesting and very exciting.
Certainly. I'm trying to stop sharing my screen with you. There we go. Perfect.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Oops.
Jim Thalen, Unified Accreditation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair Eames. And I want to note, without diminishing the incredible significance and importance of this initiative to the system in our universities, I don't have a long update, so maybe we get back a minute or two of our time on the agenda here. We are in the midst of finalizing our thinking about basically the leadership of the effort as it goes forward. I want to remind the board and everyone within university leadership of how the board authorized this effort to go forward. And it was in such a way that the system did not create new offices, new functions, a demand for new resources and staff to do what our universities have already done and what they did when they were separately accredited. I make that point because going forward in both the organization and effort to prepare the self-study, to prepare through this 2-year period for a comprehensive review of the effort when NECHI has its fall 2022 visit, that work will be done by university leaders working, of course, with coordination of system leadership, but really keeping the work to demonstrate how we meet the NECHI standards of accreditation on a unified basis, keeping it down at the university level. So I want to start with that point. The leadership structure that we will come forward with, an executive steering committee for organizing the self-study effort, will very much reflect that. And again, is in keeping with how the board authorized the effort to begin with in January of this year. Similarly, relative to the work that we have to do to demonstrate system-wide shared governance and faculty governance, that work is being driven by a group of faculty leaders from the Faculty Senate and Assemblies at our universities in the system. When I pause here, I'll invite Robert Placido or Carolyn Dorsey to comment on that. I know they've been working with those faculty leaders to keep that effort moving forward. And then the last piece that I'll note here before turning to the board policy revision that is also on the agenda related to this is that we do continue to work very closely with and discuss with representatives at the U.S. Department of Education to make sure that the financial aid administration alignment that we go forward with in unified accreditation does continue to allow our universities to manage their own federal financial aid programs as they did when they were separately accredited. That was one of the guiding principles that we established for making unified accreditation work. Those discussions with the Department of Ed are very important. What we are doing, what we are proposing in that effort is an exception to how the Department of Ed normally recognizes universities and their accreditation for the purposes of managing their financial aid programs. So what we are proposing is new and innovative, and we have support from high levels within the Department of Education. In fact, President Farini Mundy and I will be on a phone call at 1 o'clock today with the NECHI president, Larry Schall, who succeeded Barbara Brittingham. And we'll be talking with the Deputy Undersecretary for Higher Education to confirm our thinking on how we can go forward with unified accreditation, with our universities continuing to manage their own financial aid programs. We just wanted to make clear that we continue to have those discussions and engagements with the Department of Ed. They do continue to go well, but it's innovated outside the box thinking. And it requires that we have clarity with everyone from NECHI to the Department of Ed to all of our university leaders as well. And we're continuing to do that work as well. So I'll turn, unless there are questions, and maybe I should pause there for questions on those aspects, invite comment from either Robert or Carolyn Dorsey or questions from trustees.
I'll go ahead, Jim, and jump in on the faculty governance piece. Just a quick update. We did meet, I believe it was last week, with the group. The group was initially selected with the chair or president of each one of the campus faculty assembly or faculty senates, and they came together and did the initial draft that went into the document that was submitted earlier this spring. We have reconvened, but again, it was only once, and more just to try and get schedules together was the only reason we weren't meeting more frequently. We're planning to meet on a regular basis through the spring visit and then beyond. The group is certainly excited about the work. I think they're just a bit hesitant. They feel a bit of a burden in being the voice of all faculty on their campus. So I'm trying to just work with them now to try and come up with a good system for how they will take what we do in our planning meetings and disseminate it back to all of the faculty at the campuses and bring those reactions and comments back to the smaller group. They're certainly excited about the opportunity for a form of shared governance and being part of this process.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Jim on unified accreditation before we turn to the change in board policy 308? All right, Jim, seeing none, would you like to address board policy 308?
Sure. Thanks, Chair Eames. This is language that was largely before you back in September at your last meeting. I say largely because at that meeting we had discussion about adding language that would speak to the need to incorporate the principles of unified accreditation, the strategies and benefits of unified accreditation in ongoing system and university work. So the addition to this proposed language for board policy 308 is now the final sentence in the second paragraph. I'll just read it to call your attention directly to it. Ongoing governance, resource allocation, and maintenance of the system's overall academic/programmatic portfolios should be strategically undertaken so as to fully realize the opportunities and benefits of a unified system accreditation. I would note too that I think there was some discussion at the last ASA meeting about whether this policy ought to incorporate the benefits, the reasons why we were doing unified accreditation. I would suggest that that is incorporated by the reference to the guiding principles that at the beginning of this second paragraph, that we will maintain the institutional unified accreditation according to the guiding principles. And that way we don't, I would suggest we don't burden a governance policy with language beyond what we need for governance and oversight. Again, I'll pause there. Happy to invite any questions and further discussion.
Any questions for Jim? All right, seeing none, I will read the text of the resolution. That the Academic and Student Affairs Committee forwards this item to the November 16th, 2020 Board of Trustees meeting for approval of the following resolution. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee and approves the proposed changes to Board Policy 308 to incorporate the principles of unified accreditation. Are there any questions or discussion? May I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Trustee Dope. I'm sorry, the second
Second.
by Mike Mishu. Ellen, may I ask you to take the roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Eames,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Mishu,
Yes.
Trustee Tim.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, if there's nothing more on Board Policy 308, then I will ask if there's any faculty representative discussion.
Madam Chair, this is Clyde Mitchell. I'm not aware
Morning,
of
Clyde.
any morning. I'm not aware of any discussion, and I don't have any specifically from the faculty. I did have like two kind of questions. The one was that for a lot of students that are kind of facing another semester where 80-90% of their classes are going to be online, they have been asking like, what can they expect in fall next year, which obviously we don't really have an answer to, but a lot of them have been talking about taking those gap years. Is there any kind of communication or strategy we're using to kind of address that? Because, you know, a lot of them don't want to come back for having all their classes online.
Mind if I jump in there?
Please do, Robert.
So yeah, that is exactly the type of discussion with the presidents and enrollment leaders we're tackling for next year. We don't know what fall is going to look like. I mean, it's likely to look like this fall. We just, you know, it's hard to know how fast the vaccines will get out. You know, frankly, we're worried about the number of people who volunteer to get the vaccines, those kinds of things. I think we'll know much more towards the end of the spring semester. Certainly spring is going to be what fall is, but next fall to be determined. I think the message, even if it's like this fall, we're trying to get to the students is continue with your education. This is not a good time to sit at home and do nothing. This is the best path forward for you, even if it's not exactly how you imagined your college going. So, Chancellor, did you want to add anything to that, or is that?
Yeah, I think that the safe way to handle this is to plan for a September opening, which would mirror what we opened with. I would hope by that time that we'll have a larger, even if that remains the plan, that we'll have more in-classroom possibilities. But a lot of that will depend on the progress or lack of progress we make with respect to the spread of the virus and whether that's curtailed or limited in any way going forward. And quite frankly, when a vaccine would be available and the acceptance of that vaccine. But for our purposes internally, we're planning as of September next is just like this past September, including our testing. We've already made testing commitments to make sure that we can have a similar program this next semester. Quite frankly, we'll then turn our attention to what we need to do to secure appropriate levels of testing for next September. Subject to change, hope it changes, but for planning purposes, that's the way we're going.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Dr. Placido. I had one more question that was kind of related to Trustee Tim's point, that on the faculty side, a lot of faculty kind of had to, well, for their own reasons, they switched to online classes and they switched to Brightspace at the same time. And I kind of have this impression from students that maybe their faculty need to be supported more when those online classes aren't going as well. I mean, I'm very lucky that I got in-person classes, and I'm so grateful, and I'm grateful to have a job, but I realized that not all those online classes are going great. And again, that's kind of, I feel that there should be, I don't know, like some sort of damage control process in place where those experiences aren't good. And a lot of them are amazing. Somebody literally said to me that, you know, some faculty who work hard are working twice as hard, and the IT staff have been incredible. But I was wondering, you know, what's being put in place to kind of like help with improvements where faculty have been struggling with those online experiences.
So anyone else, the provost on the call, certainly welcome your thoughts and feedback. For me, and this is, I said in September, this has to be the year we draw the line in the sand and really re-examine online in a deeper way. You know, starting with how it's funded and supported. And I absolutely agree, Clyde. We're in the process of doing those deeper dives of in terms of learning design support all the way around. We implemented Quality Matters last year to sort of get our arms around, do we even check the boxes of the basic structures? David, of course, going through the process last year to get us a foundation to build upon, you know, to really get us the right tools and to implement them correctly, to make the implementation meaningful. And now I think it's upon us and academics to take it to the next level with exploring, you know, things like ACU, some external organizations even to come in and jumpstart to do sort of train the trainer and those kinds of things. We just need to spend a lot more time in this. You know, I think that online education can be awesome. I think face-to-face education can be awesome. And I think they both can be equally awful. And it's all about getting the faculty, the support, training, and encouragement to go in those right directions. So, and as Abigail said twice today, getting the student feedback to help direct us in those efforts.
Thank you. Thanks.
Could I just jump in real fast?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So John Volin, provost at University of Maine. I think this, you know, we know this is an extraordinary time, and faculty are doing a lot more, you know, because they're balancing, right? They're not only offering, in many cases, some sort of in-face presentation, but at the same time, they're trying to offer it remotely. They all have strengths and weaknesses, like Robert said, all modalities. And so, you know, I think the faculty that have developed a truly online course have actually worked with our instructional designers in the Center for Innovation, Teaching, and Learning. And those responses are just as good as face-to-face when they're done really well. So I think, you know, this is a tough time to evaluate. We're actually asking faculty to do midterm evaluations to help them, and CETL again is helping with that. So while more can be done, I think faculty are really stepping up here and doing the best that they can. So I just, want to make sure that we also recognize that.
Yeah. So Harlan Ansud, the faculty rep from the University of Maine. I'll just chime in on the Brightspace. Number one, yes, I really like SPACE. I think it's a substantial improvement. It has all kinds of benefits that we didn't have before. My students really like Brightspace and the way we're using it. But then again, well, they're seniors, primarily seniors in computer science, so they're not having a problem at all with the technology. The one thing I did find difficult was the conversion over, and I did not find the workshops all that helpful. It was primarily when I discovered the user guide that I could walk through and quickly do things myself and just focus on the things I needed rather than sitting through a long workshop that gave me a lot of information that was redundant or that I didn't need. So that was one issue. The problem was then I would like, oh, I've got a quick question. This isn't clear. I tried to call up and yes, there is a special line for faculty members, but you've got to, essentially wait a half hour, 45 minutes before you would get a call back, and there was no way to talk to somebody quickly. So that was kind of an on-demand capability, which we had before the COVID capability. CITL was providing this. You could call, get a quick answer, bam, you're done in 30 seconds and you're off and running again. So that would be one improvement I would suggest in that instance. And I've had some other technical improvements that I've been suggesting to or asking questions about how we can correct certain situations, which, I will continue to do in those instances. So those are some of my comments. I think it was a great move, although under pressure, it wasn't the ideal time, certainly, to do it for most faculty. And I can see people without a technical background having some substantial challenges in getting what they need more efficiently and effectively. And I'm guessing that's why some of those courses aren't being used right now on Brightspace. I'll just, since I've got the floor, maybe I'll bring up a couple of other things, notes to myself as we were going through the material. Relative to the imperative for change discussion, I really liked the recommendation about the Harvard implicit bias training. I think that would be very good for all faculty members that are sitting on, new faculty search committees. I think that's a real positive step forward. And I certainly would be highly supportive of that. There were also the, it was mentioned on the admission application. I'm assuming that's the undergraduate application where questions about felonies and disciplinary questions. Yes, I think there is bias there. It's good that those have been dropped. I don't think those have been dropped from our graduate school applications. And I'm wondering if that's, at least I've been seeing these type of reports certainly during the last 6 months. So I'm wondering about also activating that at the graduate level. Is the law school doing it? What about the other graduate programs around the system? Another thing I've noticed, we dropped for our online graduate programs, we've dropped the requirement for, and the online graduate programs are primarily for practicing professionals. In this case, it'd be things like information systems or computing for educators. Dropping the requirement for the GREs. People that have been working now for a decade or they want some retraining, they would like to do a no graduate degree, but taking that GRE is a significant hurdle. And my experience has been that these people that have been out working are awful mature and awful darn good students. And we probably don't need to require the graduate record exam for people that are already in industry, they want to pick up something at the graduate level now, in our case, moving more into information technologies. So I don't know how widespread that is, but I think that's very similar to dropping kind of the SATs at the undergraduate level. Very similar would be at the graduate level in certain cases, maybe not for research focused programs, but when we are offering these more practical or let's say professional-based programs. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I had, oh, sorry.
Just real quick, Tim, and I'll give you the floor. Really appreciate all the supportive comments. Thanks, and it'll be great to work with you on some of these if we can, and Rosa will reach out. And on the graduate one, I want to just quickly comment. Graduate programs are sort of a different kettle of fish. Depending on the program, they may have program level accreditation that have different requirements. We sort of have to tackle them one at a time, but certainly that is Rosa and her team's intent to reach out to those programs to see if there are language that has bias, requirements that have bias, and we look forward to working with you all on it. It sounds like we've got your support there. So, and Tim?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention something on the Brightspace transition. And I really what I want to do is mention something that's been really supportive to me in my transition over to Brightspace. And I didn't know if these mechanisms existed on other campuses or if there are opportunities for replication or whatnot. But the UMA Faculty Development Center virtual live support has been extremely helpful to me. And it gave me that synchronous support where between the hours of 10 a.m. and I think 5 p.m. over the course of August and right into September, I could click a button and immediately have access to someone with a lot of expertise in Brightspace through Zoom, and they could walk me through, we could share screens, and they could walk me through the questions that I had and help me to set up components that I wanted to set up in Brightspace. So very, very helpful. And I don't know if that's just a UMA thing only, but there are opportunities for replication. I'd highly recommend it.
In fact, that's what we had before the whole COVID crush and the transition over, but true.
I'll just chime in one response to that, Tim. Thank you for bringing that up. Our support desk team is scheduling a mini summit, if you will, with the local campus instructional design teams to basically catalog the most prevalent issues that we're seeing, the requests for support that are coming in for Brightspace, to be able to train our frontline staff at the help desk to be able to address the majority of those. So we didn't know what we'd experience this first semester with Brightspace. So this will be our opportunity to look back and see where we have some issues that we can actually mitigate and handle as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, particularly when folks are working off campus as we head into the winter and first part of the spring. So thank you for that suggestion. Great idea.
Thank you. Is there any other faculty that would like to raise any issues? Well, thank you for all those observations. I'll turn then to the student rep. I think it's that Abby. Did you have something you wanted to raise?
Yes, hi everybody. You've heard from me a couple of times this meeting, so thanks for bearing with me and for always being so accepting of the student perspective. We, as always, just really appreciate being here, even just in a representative capacity. So I think there are a few things that we just wanted to bring up and also commend that have come up in this meeting. The imperative for change, just to start, is something that we just really wanted to throw our support behind, because this is a topic that we had been discussing as students and didn't really even had a chance to need to bring up because it was already being addressed. So just we wanted to say our thanks to the Chancellor and for everybody involved with that project for putting such an emphasis on these issues that are so relevant right now, because they've definitely been on the forefront of the minds of students. So thank you for keeping that in mind. And then the second topic that we hadn't discussed, but I definitely want to mention, is that I really appreciate what's been said about Brightspace, because I know that it's been a tough transition, but I just wanted to throw in some anecdotal support for this, that I've been hearing nearly all positive feedback about that platform from students. I think it's been really helpful, and especially helpful with managing this transition to COVID. So great work, I guess I would say, from the students. And then just to keep it brief, since I know we are coming up on the end of our time, we do have something that we wanted to bring up that is more substantial and we think relevant to the to this committee because it will have such a direct and important impact on students, even though it's not something that was directly mentioned in this committee meeting. And that's the academic calendar for this spring, just looking ahead to our plans for what sort of break we're going to be giving students in the spring. We just wanted to put it out there for consideration to the board that we think it's absolutely vital that there is some sort of break, and we have concerns that getting out a week early is not going to be a sufficient reprieve for students, just because it happens so retrospectively after all of everything that goes on with spring break and all of the academic trials have already happened. Then that's when students get that reprieve, and we don't think that's going to be enough for students. And we just wanted to voice our concern for the mental health of students within these considerations of physical health, because both are important and we think both will have a significant impact on university retention and on the health of our student body in general. As a substitute for this plan, one that we all discussed and wanted to propose in front of you was taking these days that would have been allocated for spring break and redistributing them across the semester in the form of one-day breaks instead. So just something that can hit a little hiccup into the, just to be honest, brutal pace of spring semester when all of these other commitments are coming up. Just being able to give students a little bit of a nick where they can take a breather, take some mental health time, and just take some space. We drafted some documents related to this, some of our primary concerns and some of the solutions that we think could be implemented to address those concerns, which I would be happy to share with anybody, but didn't want to take too much of your time today. I thought it would be more appropriate for you to read about it, and then however you'd like to get involved, we would be happy to have those conversations with you from the student perspective. The other thing that we wanted to mention is that we have concerns about what sort of testing regimen is going to be going on surrounding spring break next semester. Just understanding that there are a lot of students who are going to go it their own way and do what they want anyways. You all have an understanding of how college kids can operate. And I just want to say that I'm concerned, and I think all of the board reps are concerned, that there is going to be a need for more stringent testing surrounding the time of spring break. Understanding that we think that there is still going to be some travel off campus just based on what we've been hearing in our own communities. So we wanted to support some sort of advanced effort for testing around the same time that spring break would have been happening. Those are our main points and our main concerns. I'm the spokesperson here today, but all of the reps have been very actively involved with this conversation and have been very active about these concerns. So I'm sure that you could reach out to any of them, but I would be happy to field any comments or questions that you have now in person or via email, however you'd like to contact me.
So first, I'd like to just say thanks again. Great engagement. If you could send me your document, your proposal, and I'll sit down with the chancellor and we can figure out how to move that forward to greater discussion amongst the presidents. The idea of enhanced testing around spring break, that is going to be part of the plan, just like we did around the Columbus Day where we heightened our testing. So absolutely great comments. Appreciate your input.
Awesome, that's great to hear. Yep, I'll send that right along to you, as soon as I get a chance in the next couple of days.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else that anybody had intended to bring up that we haven't discussed?
Trustee Eames, this is Janine Musi. I wanted to go back, if Jim Phelan is still here. I see the big J, but I don't know if he's actually still with us. I wanted to go back. Hi, Jim. You said that you and President Frieden-Lindy would be meeting with Larry and Etche about, and you mentioned financial aid specifically, and so my ears perked up, but I wanted to just see if you could say a little bit more about the specifics around the financial aid discussion. Did I hear that correctly?
Sure, I'm happy to get into more detail. It requires an acknowledgement, a little bit of what is turning out to be a little bit of sausage making with the Department of Ed as we talk through how they recognize each university's ability to continue managing their own financial aid. Because in unified accreditation, when we initially presented it to the Department of Ed, the first thing that they thought of was, oh, you're merging all of your universities together. Therefore, you must be merging the administration of all financial aid across the system, and the system will now manage financial aid. There'll be a single allocation to the system, and FAFSA applications will all be in the name of the system, and we don't want that. And we believe, because of legal opinions we've gotten from our counsel on this, who used to be the Deputy General Counsel at the U.S. Department of Education, that the Department of Ed can recognize each university's ability to continue receiving a direct allocation of Title IV funds from the Department of Education, can manage those funds the way they do now, even though the accreditation, let's say it's been bumped up to the system, it's unified now for the entire system and all the universities in it. In the past, the Department of Ed has always directly connected a university's accreditation to their ability to offer financial aid. So now that each university points to the system to say, that's how we're accredited, we just need the Department of Education to recognize that that is still a mechanism by which our universities can manage their own Title IV financial aid. So as we've had these discussions with departmental staff, we've had staff in the program eligibility offices of the department continue to ask us, well, when are you going to file your merger application? The Deputy Secretary, Undersecretary of Education for Higher Ed, a woman named Diane Jones, who happens to have had a personal relationship or a former professional relationship with President Farini Mundy at UMaine, reached out to us last week and offered to have a telephone call today to clarify and work this out. So the reference earlier in my comments to having a phone call is to that phone call. It's not intended to be a call with NECHI per se, but Diane Jones at the Department of Ed requested that NECHI participate if they could. That way we'll all be hearing the same things, we'll all be resolving it in the same way, and hopefully have the clarity we finally need to put this issue to rest. Does that help?
Jim, could I just jump in briefly on this too, Jim? To add one more piece. So yes, Diane Jones and I worked together in a couple of capacities when I was in DC. But the other complexity that we should mention here is that there is a different situation with the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias that is also right on the table right now at the U.S. Department of Education. And the two universities are in very close contact because the arrangement that we have with Machias, which is a regional campus of UMaine, and this primary partnership does require handling of financial aid in a different way than what Jim is describing as what we want for the system. It does look more like a merger on paper. And in fact, UMaine is now handling all UMaine Machias financial aid. And so that's another whole conversation, but they're conflated right now because it's the same people at the Department of Education working on processing the UMaine Machias situation. And at the same time, I think taking a look at the overall unified accreditation. More detail probably than anyone wants or needs, but Janine, I thought particularly that might help clarify what's happening.
No, that is all the detail I was desiring.
I figured, yeah.
I feel like, I mean, this is the crux of unified accreditation is, can we kind of have our cake and eat it too? Can we get the unified accreditation and keep our financial aid autonomy? And I mean, so this is the heart of the matter. So I'll mute myself now, but good luck.
Thanks. And thanks for that clarification too, Joan, relative to how Machias is being handled, because I think Joan makes a good point. The Department of Ed staff who have been working on the Machias piece just assumed that we would also handle the merger system-wide in the same way that we're doing with Machias, and that's not what we're doing. So it'll be good to have the clarity out of this call. I wanted to acknowledge too, we have, I think I made reference to the council with whom we continue to work on this. He and I have prepared for our call today a 3-page discussion outline, and I'm happy to make that available, well, certainly to any trustee who wants to see it, but more importantly for chief academic officers and perhaps through Robert, we can make it available to financial aid officers as well.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Joan, Janine. Any other questions?
I just want to say one thing. Janine, I appreciate your comments, but the heart of the matter of unified accreditation is to be a more student-centered set of institutions where we can use the best that we have available at all of our universities, potentially to lift and make progress for all of our universities across the borders that have previously existed. So, I mean, I understand, I'm 100% with you on getting this right, and very thankful that the Deputy Secretary is consistent in her belief that this could be done. But I just can't let it go by that there aren't a whole lot of other things that we're attempting to impact, including having a whole new tool set to address economic challenges, which I'm more fearful may play out in this coming September than they did in this really good September that we previously had. Just a note.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, well, we will see you all again at the board meeting in November. And I believe the next ASA meeting is on January 4th, but I know that Ellen and Heather will keep us informed of that. So with that, stay warm, and it's nice to see you all.